Welcome to Fine Tuning with Drew Taylor, your one-stop shop when it comes to animation news and commentary. I'm Drew's co-host, entertainment writer Jim Hill, and he and I are recording this on Monday, February 10th, 2020, which is the day after the Academy Awards. And Drew, I know you were very pleased by how well Parasite did last night.
Yes, I was over the moon. And Jim, you need to see it. That is my one requirement. It's supposedly expanding wider this weekend for obvious reasons. But yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of this guy since I used to work at a video store, and we got an import of one of his first movies called Memories of Murder, and I just watched it and was transfixed, and I have been in love with this guy's work ever since. So I hope that you go and seek out some of his earlier movies and just envelop yourself in the majesty of Bong Joon-ho, because he is really an amazing filmmaker. So I was thrilled last night, Jim. Thrilled.
Well, cool. And I thought he handled himself ridiculously well, though, after a while, I'm going to get even more drunk now story. Get him another joke, but all right.
That was
anyway.
That was like what you were watching at home, Jim, when you saw Eminem come up. You started taking shots, and by the end of it, you were three sheets to the wind. Yeah.
Yeah, that explains the voice.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, in other Oscar-related news, I have to admit I was pleased that Hair Love won
Right.
The Best Animated Short. I mean, in the Best of All Possible Worlds, they would have split the award, or at least as far as I'm concerned, with Rosanna Sullivan's Kit Bull.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if one film had to win, I don't have a problem with Hair Love winning.
Right.
And did you notice the Kobe Bryant nod?
Yeah, I did. I was wondering what that was about.
Well, this morning, Matthew Cherry made an appearance on Live with Kelly and Ryan. They were in, I want to say, the Dolby. And he explained that Kobe obviously was the first African-American filmmaker to ever win for, an Academy Award for Best Animated Short. And so when the nominations came out this year and Matthew and the rest of the team on Hair Love had gotten the second nod, Kobe reached out via Twitter and, just gave him, sort of props for, welcome to the club and wish you well and that sort of thing. So this was kind of Cherry's way of acknowledging that gracious gesture. So, okay. On the other hand, Toy Story 4 wins, which again, Drew, I'm still not on board here.
Oh, man. I love it.
I promise when it shows up on Disney Plus, I'll give it another run.
It's on right now, Jim. You have no excuses. You're not feeling
it.
well?
Okay.
Yeah, after this, you're going to lay down, you're going to have a cup of soup, and you're going to watch Toy Story 4.
Okay, I'm going to try again. But for me, well, first of all, Randy Newman's performance of "I Can't Let You Throw Yourself Away" kind of redefined throwing a performance away. It was like, I'm doing the song I'm making it sound like I wrote it in 3 minutes. And I have to say, look, if Leica had taken home the Best Animated Feature Award for Missing Link, or Sergio and his team had taken it home for Klaus, I think it would have meant more. For Toy Story 4 to kind of take it home, it's like, well, yeah, okay, it's Pixar again. And it's hard for me, with it being the fourth Toy Story film, whereas a Coco or an Inside Out, or for that matter, a Brave, when a film like that gets acknowledged, it's like, okay, this is worthy. This one, it just sort of kind of felt like, you made a lot of money. Congratulations. Here's your Oscar.
Right.
So
I think maybe it's just like when people are voting, they see Pixar, they see Disney, and they know, well, even if I don't watch it, this is probably the best one, and they vote, for it. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, Jim.
Okay. Well, speaking of other moments that made me kind of uncomfortable, when James Corden and Rebel Wilson came out dressed in their cat outfits and proceeded to make the joke that and on behalf of the cast of Cats, we understand how important it is to have good visual effects, which, face it, that was kind of a cheap shot, right?
Yeah, I was not into that. And if you'll see people from the visual effects community also sort of getting offended by this. There's a great visual effects artist named Tav Vaziri, who I follow, and who actually worked on some of the Mission Impossibles, and we had him on the show, and he was talking about how that was just kind of a cheap shot, and it's like, it wasn't their fault the movie was terrible. This is how people conceived it, you know? So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, that's the thing. When you talk with people who work in the Visual Effects Society, and they're always, and in fact, remember the story about Cats where they released it, and it's like, we're not done yet. You know, you had your locked-in release date. We didn't finish the effects. And what was it, 3 days later, 4 days later, they sent the further finished version out in the theaters. I mean, these are people who are, you know, sleeping under their desks, you know, putting in 68 hours a week trying to make these locked-in release dates. And it's, again, it's just not a happy guy. On the other hand, what kind of made me happy is the way they handled Into the Unknown.
That was awesome. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think that was one of the only times out of the night where the set design actually worked. You know, having the call and response performer up further, I enjoyed that. But face it, you know, I mean, given what happened with, you know, Frozen 2 this award season, let's be honest here. This all happened within like 10 minutes. Toy Story 4 won the award, and then Into the Unknown, you know, was performed on stage. And then I want to say, when they went to commercial, it was a Disney Plus ad. So it was like, hi, you know, we'll get you back to the Academy Awards in a few moments. But first, the Disney show. And by the way, did you remember that, you know, Frozen 2 is available on digital and iTunes and Amazon Video starting on Tuesday? So I don't know. Sometimes that aspect of the Oscar that, you know, we are here, in fact, to sell a few movie tickets.
Right.
You know, it kind of gets in the front window. Though, you know, what this also made me think of was back in March of 2013 when, as I mentioned, Pixar's Brave took home the Oscar for Best Animated Feature, and Brenda Chapman got on stage and was able to acknowledge her wonderful, beautiful, strong daughter, Emma, who had inspired that movie. And face it, Drew, we've been waiting a long time since then for a new movie from Brenda. In fact, I was really looking forward to Come Away, the live action movie that she shot in 2018. Did you ever see the log line for this one? Or it's the one with Angelina Jolie and Michael Caine?
Yeah, it's kind of a prequel kind of fairy tale thing with Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, right?
Yeah, well, as I understand it, it's a mother and father who were in mourning because they've lost their oldest child, a boy. And so the two younger kids, a daughter named Alice and a son named Peter, try to sort of get their family to move past this loss. But what's kind of cool about the premise is Alice isn't just any Alice. She's the Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and likewise Peter isn't just any Peter. He's Peter Pan. So this debuted just last month at Sundance, right? And
yeah,
we were both just looking to see if it got a distribution deal, and so far
doesn't
nothing.
look like it. It wasn't super well received out of Sundance. So, you know, I don't know, Jim.
Okay. The reason we're bringing up Brenda at this point is she just landed a deal for her next project, Ghost Squad, which is supposed to be based on a soon-to-be-published book from Scholastic. I don't know if you've seen any of the pieces of the concept art that are out for this, but it's set in St. Augustine, Florida. So there's this one shot of this tremendous boat dock that has like 1 billion cats on it, leading to this house on the beach. But evidently the premise of the story is two outcast kids accidentally release malicious spirits just before Halloween. And I really hope this movie happens. But at the same time, I've been hoping that both Brenda and her husband, Kevin Lima, they've just had such a horrible run of luck. I mean, I'm sure you were keeping tabs for a while there on what was it, Bollywood Monkey Superstar, the thing that Kevin was working on over at DreamWorks. that had a score by Steven Schwartz, I want to say, and 4 years that thing was in development, serious development over at DreamWorks, and it got canceled in January of 2015. What, largely because they were getting DreamWorks ready to sell to Universal, right?
Yeah, that was when they were really juggling the calendar. I think that was at the same time that they put Penguins of Madagascar up before Home, and yeah, there was a lot of juggling going on at that point. I remember that very well. Yeah.
So he comes out of that heartbreaking situation, and he and Brenda score a deal with 20th Century Fox. Together they're setting up a production company, but they cut a deal with 20th Century Fox just before Disney announces its acquisition, and again in one of these situations where a studio is getting ready to be sold to an even larger studio, and that's when you kill a lot of production deals. You slim the company down to make it that much more attractive and easier to sell. And I don't know, for me, I felt like, especially last year when, Lion King was out there making billions of dollars and Jon Favreau was getting all of this acclaim, and it's like, Brenda was the head of story on the original Lion King back in '94, and would it have hurt to get just a nod in her direction?
Yeah. So. Well, did you also remember when she was at Lucasfilm and she was working on some animated feature there?
Oh God, yes.
I think it was
Strange Magic.
Yeah, I think it eventually became Strange Magic, but she's never talked about it before.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you poke at her, credit is consultant, as in, I came through the door, I looked at it, I said, there's no way you can fix this, and I walked out. But again, that's another one of those projects that after Disney bought Lucasfilm, it's like, yeah, what do we do with this? It's like all those completed episodes of Star Wars Detour that are somewhere in a vault,
right.
that Seth Green and the crew at Robot Chicken did. That every so often, a couple of those will bubble up on YouTube. But anyway, speaking of Disney related reboots, now we've seen some movement on the Lilo and Stitch project. That they've got a script now by Mike Van Was, and evidently the Aladdin producers, David Lin and John Elrich, are on board to produce this as well. You were mentioning you don't necessarily think that this is headed straight for Disney Plus.
Yeah. I mean, the report was from a site called the Diz Insider or something. Mm-hmm. It's not the New York Times. So, okay. I think that's one thing. And then the other thing is that there's such a huge retail component to Lilo and Stitch. I mean, the Tomorrow Landing and Tomorrowland out here at Disneyland is just a Stitch store. Stitch and Angel and, whoever else. And obviously they love both of those characters in the Japanese parks. To me, they might be leaving money on the table if they decide to not go theatrical. And I don't ever see Disney doing that. So I would be very surprised if it was a Disney Plus film.
Okay. Speaking of which, though, I guess we should pivot at least for a minute or two to talk about the Mulan situation, which is, I don't know if you saw the story in the trades earlier this week about how Disney is proceeding with the March release of this film, even though, as of right now, it looks like this is not going to be shown in mainland China or in Hong Kong. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm sure they were planning to do something at the Shanghai Park. Mm-hmm. You can't do that anymore. It's a tricky situation between that and what's going on with Hong Kong. Not a great time for Disney Asian parks right now.
No, I agree. But, you face it, once it's released in North America or thereabouts, in fact, let's be completely honest here, Drew, that one of the reasons, like over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen movies, for example, a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films released in Russia or Asia ahead of the States, is because when these sorts of films debuted in the States, they were pirated and immediately went overseas. And the thinking at the Disneys of the world is, well, if we open there first, there's less opportunity to pirate this film. Face it, with a title like Mulan, from the moment this opens up in North America, that's headed overseas. This is a title that people have really been looking forward to. It's got to be a frustration at Disney just thinking about the lost revenue by not being able to open in those markets following the Marvel Cinematic Universe pattern.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's an interesting landscape right now, Jim, for sure.
Absolutely. And speaking of interesting films arriving in the marketplace, starting on Thursday night, Sonic the Hedgehog is released. And again, let's remember, folks, this is the film that got pushed back after the first trailer dropped in May of last year. Got pushed back from an originally a November release date to a February release date. And as I understand it, they spent 5 months retooling the look of the title character. To hear Jim Fowler, the director of the film, talk, they only spent $5 million to, retool the film. So, it bumped up the budget from $90 million to $95 million. But you were saying that just the fact that it has so little buzz isn't necessarily a good thing?
I've heard from folks that it's not very good. Let's just say that. Okay. Review embargoes have not broken yet, even though it comes out on Thursday night, which is also not a great sign. But yeah, supposedly it's a road trip movie where Sonic the Hedgehog sits in a car for most of the running time, which is very weird because he is the fastest creature on Earth or whatever. So yeah, it's a little weird, Jim. It's a little weird, but I always hope for the best.
Okay. Well, same thing here. And speaking of films that actually, I'm really pulling for, and oddly enough, it's Togo that got me excited about this, but the Harrison Ford Call of the Wild, which of course you were pointing out, this is directed by Chris Sanders, who along with Dean DuBois did the original Lilo and Stitch.
And he was on the story department for Lion King, and his storyboards are my favorite because they look like Chris Sanders versions of all the characters, and it's so cool to see those.
Oh yeah. And they're also they're wonderfully clear.
Yes. Yeah.
You can always tell with a Chris Sanders storyboard drawing where you're supposed to look. More to the point, what's the emotion?
Yeah.
And it's just a remarkable clarity. But,
yeah.
But again, that comes out Friday after next, so February 21st. And I want to say somebody was telling me earlier this week about reshoots, but it's like, face it, these days, it used to be, oh my God, they're reshooting the film, and that means trouble. And these days it means they're reshooting the film. That means it's Tuesday. Right. It is kind of the landscape these days. You get something in, you edit it together and go, we needed that, or we need this, or we should have done that differently. And it's kind of built into, the actual production schedule.
Yeah.
And
I think especially with an animator who's so used to an iterative process that it actually is beneficial to his process as well. Just being able to tweak, and redo things, because that's the landscape he came from,
But see, now I'm thinking, now Drew says I got to sit down and watch Toy Story 4, but, I really would rather watch Togo, so maybe. All right. Well, okay, so we've been talking about profitable franchises and such. In a moment, Drew and I are going to take a look at Winnie-the-Pooh and that franchise's problematic start at the studio and how it went from a standalone featurette to a franchise that once rivaled Mickey Mouse when it came to profitability.
Breathe deep. Imagine your legs more limber in Duluth Trading Double Flex Denim. Envision euphorically squatting for that can of suds, bending for your toolbox in a state of bliss, lunging for your laser level on a whole new level. Relax and allow the flex to fill you with ability. Find your inner flex in Double Flex Denim only at Duluth Trading.
This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. Psst. Healthcare pros, word's out, and it's too good to keep quiet. Look, LinkedIn is revolutionizing job hunting, making it possible to search by specialty, shift preference, and salary. Endless scrolling is out. Whether it's a mental health therapist or dental hygienist, finding the perfect role is faster and easier than ever. Head to linkedin.com/healthcare and start your search today.
All right. Before we get started here, just this week over at Disney Dish, Len and I did the history of the Disney Institute, and you were telling me, Drew, off air that you had a story about
Well, I took classes there. Or sorry, not classes, Jim. Workshops, right?
Okay.
Yes, I did I think I did a computer animation class and a stop motion animation class, and this must have been right when it opened, maybe 95, 96. Okay. And during the stop motion class, the professor had told us, because he was probably an animator down there or had worked on Nightmare Before Christmas or something, and he had said that Nick Park had just been through, because this was the time when Katzenberg was trying to woo Aardman to do a movie with Disney back in the day that never ended up happening. He finally got them for when he went over to DreamWorks, obviously, with Chicken Run. But I just thought that was fascinating that he had been in Florida, had been at the Disney Institute. They had tried to get him, and it didn't happen. And I was there like right around this time when all this was going on.
Okay, so let me add a teeny tiny story to the pile here. My friend Justin Jorgensen worked on the infamous redo of Journey into Imagination. And
he's to blame. He's to blame.
Well, no, I genuinely feel bad for Justin, because they were in an impossible situation. Kodak had said, "Here's your $1.50 and do with it what you can." But Justin was mentioning that during this period of time, when they were looking at redoing the attraction, that they had gotten a list from Disney corporate about who they could use as new celebrities in the attraction. And what was fascinating is on the list during this period was Wallace and Gromit. They had acquired the theme park rights, I don't know how long, from Aardman, but Wallace and Gromit could be used in a theme park attraction. So was there a way perhaps to bring these characters into the attraction? And the other one that kind of caught my attention was Michael Jordan.
Interesting.
Yeah. So these two were literally on the list of, okay, could you use these, when you're redoing the Imagination Pavilion? And it was, and here's a handful of pipe cleaners and folding chairs. Is this enough? Can this is enough for you to work with? And we all saw how that turned out. But anyway, we were talking about Winnie-the-Pooh, and I apologize, folks. I'm using a totally artificial reason to talk about Winnie-the-Pooh with today's fine tuning, because I was looking at the calendar and noticed that, well, first of all, again, Drew and I are recording this on February 10th, and on February 11th, the Tigger movie and Pooh's Heffalump movie were released to theaters. The Tigger movie was released in February 11th, 2000, and the Heffalump movie was released in February of 2005. So, like I said, bogus excuse, but I'm taking it. All right, so start with the obvious. Drew, have you ever read any of the A.A. Milne books that the Winnie-the-Pooh films are based on?
I never have. I'm sad to report.
Well, there's a total of 4 of them. When We Were Very Young, which is, in fact, that's the book that the Edward Bear character that eventually becomes Winnie-the-Pooh is introduced in. That was published in 1924. Then Pooh gets his own standalone book in October of 1926. Then there's a book called Now We Are 6. It's a sequel to When We Were Very Young. That's published in 1927. And then finally in 1928, the Methuen publishes The House at Pooh Corner. And that's it. These are the 4 books. Because that's the thing. A.M. Milne really thought of himself as more of a serious playwright, and these were sort of kind of a knockoff thing that he did. But they're hugely popular. By the early 1960s, they've sold more than 10 million copies, and they've been translated in 12 different languages. And they come on Disney's radar in like 38. And, Diane Disney Miller tells the story about her dad came into her bedroom. And it's like, what are you laughing at? And she's, well, this book, Dad, this thing about Winnie-the-Pooh. And so he spends the next 2 decades trying to get his hands on them. And again, as I mentioned, the problem is A. Milne thought of himself as a serious playwright. And it really, later in life, it really began to bother him that, so many people associated him with these children's books. So he was very deliberate about, I will not release the rights. But then in 1952, he has a stroke that leaves him as an invalid. He finally passes away in January 56. And it's Milne's widow, Daphne, who, after waiting a discrete period, then begins entertaining offers from Hollywood. And the real Christopher Robin Milne honestly wanted nothing to do with Winnie-the-Pooh being commercialized. This is why, for example, you can go to New York, to the New York Public Library, and see the really for real toys that Christopher Robin played with on display at the New York Public Library. He donated them. It wasn't a case of, put these up for the highest bidder. But anyway, starting in the late 1950s, early 1960s, selective rights to the Pooh characters, start to bubble up. The folks who produced the Shirley Temple show for NBC got the rights to do an hour-long version of Winnie the Pooh that was done with the Bill Baird marionettes. You've seen those.
Yeah.
They're featured in The Sound of Music, the Yodelehi song. Or whatever.
Yes.
Okay, so Disney finally acquires the film rights to Winnie the Pooh in June of 1961. And December of 63, Sword in the Stone comes out, and that's based on the T.H. White book. It underperforms at the box office. And so as 1964 starts, Walt believes that the reason that Sword of the Stone did so poorly at the box office was because the script that Bill Peet wrote for the project didn't stick closely enough to the source material, that it didn't follow the storyline of the T.H. White novel. And Bill Peet really resents this, so much so that he's worked at the studio for 27 years at this point. He's built himself up to the point where he's the sole writer of 101 Dalmatians. And likewise, he's the sole writer of Sword in the Stone. But on January 29th, 1964, he quits. He just walks out the door. And he's already got a pretty successful career as a storybook illustrator and writer. And he then becomes the Bill Peet we know and love today. But Walt decides that when it comes to A. Milne's Winnie-the-Pooh, that first of all, he wants to make a full-length animated feature. And more to the point, he wants to stick as close to the source material as humanly possible. And there's this magazine called The Disney World. It's the in-house publication for folks who work at Walt Disney Productions in the 60s, the folks who worked on a lot in Burbank, and then the others over at Glendale at WED headquarters. And in the February-March 1965 issue, they talk about the still-in-production Winnie-the-Pooh and how during the planning and animation stage, Walt and director Wolfgang Reitherman referred time and again to Ernest Shepard's original ink and paint sketches, so that all of A. Milne's legendary characters, Winnie-the-Pooh, Christopher Robin, Eeyore, Piglet, Tigger, Owl, Kanga, and Roo, they'd come to the screen exactly as Pooh fans had known them for more than 30 years. And it wasn't just the character design. They wanted the background. Woolley goes on to say, in painting the backgrounds of the featurette, we often employed transparent watercolors so that the exclusive charm of Shepard's free pink and 8 drawings could predominate the colors. And more to the point, they wanted the characters on screen to be as close to Shepard's original sketches as an animatable character can be. What's fascinating to me about that, Drew, is think about that. 15 years earlier, here's Disney laboring to do Alice in Wonderland, to bring that to the screen. And the Sir John Tenniel's illustrations for those books that are so distinctive. And in the end, Disney decides there's just no way we can bring that sort of ink and paint style to the screen. And that's when they effectively sort of pivot, and it's like, okay, Mary Blair, what can you do with this? I don't know. I'm just fascinated to watch how Disney's opinions about what works for the screen change, over the history of the studio. Anyway, Walt still wants to do Winnie the Pooh as a full-length feature, but he believes that in order to do this, he needs a star. So he reaches out to then popular stand-up comic George Gobel, and he asks him, will you do the voice of the silly old bear? He makes this offer to George in early 1964. And George goes home and reads all 4 of the Winnie the Pooh books. And to be blunt, George doesn't get it. He reads them and it's like they're whimsical, they're charming,
right.
But Winnie the Pooh as a character is kind of boring, so he turns Walt down. This kind of throws Walt for a loop because he feels like, especially coming off of what happened with Sword in the Stone, where he felt like I really didn't have a star in that, and maybe that's another reason it didn't perform. Suddenly he's thinking, maybe we're not going to do Winnie the Pooh as a full-length animated feature. Maybe we're going to do it as a featurette. But then it becomes a question of, okay, so what film are we pairing with? And initially they were thinking they were going to put it out into theaters with That Darn Cat in December of 1965. Problem with that, though, is That Darn Cat is 116 minutes long. Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree is 27 minutes long. And if you pair those 2 films, that's a 2.5-hour double bill. And that means if you're an exhibitor who's running, a movie theater or a chain of movie theaters, you can get far fewer showings a day of that double bill because it's 2.5 hours. On the other hand, Disney has another animal-based comedy, The Ugly Dachshund. And by the way, what's kind of intriguing about these 2, Drew, is they both star Dean Jones. It's honestly kind of hard looking over Dean Jones's career at Disney. And Tim Conway used to tell this great joke about when you got hired to work at Disney. It's like you'd show up and they go, okay, well, here's your costume and here's your animal. Just whether you're being handed Gus, the field-kicking mule, or the tiger from World's Greatest Athlete. But all of these performers had to, to work with animals at some point.
Right.
But anyway, Ugly Dachshund is only 93 minutes long. So if you paired a 27-minute featurette with that, that's only 2 hours and 10 minutes, which means, you could sneak in another show a day. So that's what they decided to do. They're going to put, Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, the featurette out with Ugly Dachshund is a double bill in February of 66. But to make sure that they take advantage of this extra time, they cut a deal with Sears. It's the effect of, look, you'll have an exclusive on the Winnie the Pooh characters, and you can use them for clotheslines, you can use them for plush, whatever you want to do. But what we ask in return is that, you do these lots of in-store promotions for Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. Then Walt has walk-around character costumes created for the 5 Winnie the Pooh characters. Pooh, Eeyore, Owl, Rabbit, and Kanga. And Drew, I heartily recommend you Google Winnie the Pooh 1965 just to see these walk-around characters because they're horrifying.
Is this the Pooh with the honey on his head?
Well, yes,
okay.
but and again, these are all costumes that Bill Justice designed, and the interesting thing is the Eeyore one has basically stayed the same since 65. Whereas the owl one, for example, they put a professor's hat on the top of his head. So, they have space. I mean, in much the same way as Winnie the Pooh had the honey pot. So you could accommodate a guy with height who'd look out through the honey pot. But the rabbit is just distorted. But anyway, they actually trot these out first time in October of 65 for the National Association of Theater Owners Convention in LA. And then for the holiday parade at Disneyland from December of 65 through early January of 66. These characters are walking through the park every day behind a honey tree float. And then what's kind of interesting is literally 10 days before the movie opens, they take cast members and they take these same costumes and throw them on the Gulf Stream, the thing that Walt used during his land search for Project Florida in 63.
Oh, wow.
And they proceed to fly them around the country. They visit 25 different cities. I want to say over 21 days. So it's a brutal tour. And more to the point, because it's February. For example, when they land in D.C., they have a freak snowstorm, and they have to figure out how to get through to the next stop on the tour when, there are 5-foot snowdrifts at Dulles Air Force. But interesting thing, it all pays off. The movie comes out, smash hit, February of 66. So much so, by May of 66, Walt is already reaching out to the animation team, congratulate them, but also saying, maybe it's time for us to start developing a sequel to Winnie-the-Pooh and the Honey Tree. So, but again, they have all this development art and all the work they've done on the feature. So they just sort of pivot. And all right, let's go back to what we didn't use. And there's 2 characters they especially left off the table because they were going to be challenging from an animation point of view. And one of them was Tigger, kind of the overexuberant stuffed tiger, and the other one was Pooh's timid little friend Piglet. And what's interesting is by November of 66, again, here's Disney World Magazine talking about work is expected to get underway in January of 67 on a sequel to the Honey Tree featurette. And this is at that time known as Winnie-the-Pooh and the Heffalumps. And Walt is really, really excited about this project because he's got the actor that he thinks is going to be perfect as the voice of Tigger, and that's Wally Bogue, the star of Disney's long-running Golden Horseshoe Revue. But then December 15th, 1966, Walt dies, and a lot of stuff suddenly goes sideways at the studios, and one of the things that especially goes sideways is Wally Bogue's career. I mean, this is kind of a lesser talked about aspect of when Walt ran the company, but Walt had his favorites. And if you were Walt's favorite, you got to do extra cool stuff. I mean, Wally, for example, was given the opportunity to write the script for the original Tiki Bird show, which opened in June of 63. He also got to do cameos in movies like 61's The Absent-Minded Professor and 63's sequel to Absent-Minded Professor, Son of Flubber. This was Walt. Again, it's like, I want to give Wally this opportunity. I want to give him a chance to be in an animated film. And because all of these people have been standing by waiting to be Walt's favorite and being ignored, once Walt was gone, they kind of took advantage of that. And Wally's opportunities outside of the theme parks kind of dried up at that point. And when it came time for Winnie-the-Pooh and the Blustery Day, when it finally arrived in theaters, that's what the name got changed to after Winnie-the-Pooh and the Heffalumps. Tigger was now voiced by Paul Winchell. And Drew, you probably remember the stories about what happened with Paul Winchell. I mean, he did the character for like 30 years, and then what was it? It was the Tigger movie that they brought him in to record on.
Yes.
And as I understand it, this is spring of 98. They bring him in for one day. And the thing is that Paul's now 76 at this point, and he's older and his voice is a little raspy. They're sitting in the booth listening to this, and it's just like, geez, he doesn't really sound like Tigger anymore. And this whole movie is built around Tigger. And so, they thank Paul, they pay him for the day, and then they turn around and get Jim Cummings, who is now the voice of Winnie-the-Pooh, because Sterling Holloway had passed away in the 70s. And now Jim Cummings is the voice of Pooh and Tigger. You got your copy of Kevin Rafferty's Magic Journey book, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so the Imagineers were offended that Paul had been treated this way. So when they were doing the Many Adventures of Winnie-the-Pooh attraction, the replacement for Mr. Toad's Wild Ride for Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom, they made a point of saying the only person we'll accept to play Tigger in this attraction is Paul Winchell. Kevin tells this really interesting story about that recording session. The way the story goes is, he comes in, And he's really worked hard to get his voice back in good shape. And he's there for the full day and does great work. And everyone's pleased with what he's going to do. And they're wrapping up the recording session. And Paul turns to the engineer and says, as a favor, can we record one more thing? And it's like, okay, sure. What is it you want to record? And they fire up the recording device, and Paul, steps up to the mic and says, TTFR, Ta-ta forever. And that was the thing. Hail and farewell to doing that character. But anyway, Winnie-the-Pooh stays a cash cow at Disney for years. Toys continued to fly off the shelf. In fact, for a number of years during the 1980s, the number one best-selling album at, the history of the company was, of course, the soundtrack of the original Mary Poppins. But right behind that, and I want to say the 2, 3, and 4 position, were a number of Winnie-the-Pooh related albums. Again, people loved this. And Disney did this really, really smart thing in the late 90s where they effectively divided the product line. So they had what they referred to as Disney's Pooh, the one with the red shirt and the orange fur.
Right.
And then they had Classic Pooh, which they had all of these illustrations of the character that were basically based on the Ernest Shepard drawings. And what ended up happening, it was such a smart play that for a time during this period, Winnie-the-Pooh merchandise, the sales of merchandise actually put more in the company's coffers than the sale of Mickey Mouse merchandise did. But then the year after that, as happened, sales slid a bit. And, the folks at Consumer Products were like, okay, so how do we get the sales up again? And I don't know if when you were at Oh My Disney, the topic of Lumpy the Heffalump ever came up.
No. Is he is he the hero Heffalump?
Well, he's the little baby Heffalump. In fact, supposedly he's based on a character that was introduced in the Adventures of Winnie-the-Pooh animated series that was done for television in the 80s. And it was a junior Heffalump. And, it's well, what if there was a little Heffalump that could be Pooh's friend? And that's where Lumpy came in, this little purple Heffalump. In fact, again, he got his own film, as we mentioned at the top there, in 2005. But what's fascinating is that people at Disney kept Lumpy going. I mean, he was in no less than 3 home premieres. The Pooh's Heffalump Halloween movie, Pooh's Super Sleuth Christmas movie. As recently as last year, the character showed up in the Kingdom Hearts game. Now, to be fair, the Kingdom Hearts game was years behind schedule, and so it's not a question of Lumpy's front and center right now. But I guess for me, what's fascinating about this is that, remember, there was that CG version, My Friends Tigger and Pooh show that was, created where Christopher Robin was no longer Pooh's friend. It was a little girl named Darby.
Yes.
And the weird part of it is that shuts down production in, 2010. And then in July of 2011, we get that hand-drawn version of Winnie-the-Pooh that effectively kills hand-drawn at Disney because they send it out into theaters. Didn't it open the exact same day as part 2 of Deathly Hallows?
Yes.
Supposedly
Dick Cook didn't like it, so he sent it to the slaughter.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, because I don't know. It just, for me, what's fascinating is watching how Disney continues to go back to the well with Pooh. I mean, back in the summer of 2018, we had the Christopher Robin movie, which, again, Disney Consumer Products, Parks and Experiences. They created a brand new line of Winnie-the-Pooh dolls to go out into stores to support that film. And I guess that what I found completely ironic, Drew, is that these dolls were modeled after the real Winnie-the-Pooh dolls that are on display at the New York Public Library, the ones that the real Christopher Robin donated because he did not want Winnie-the-Pooh to be commercialized, and here was Disney using that to commercialize the characters yet again. I don't know. I have to ask again, given that you were in-house at Disney for a number of years, Pooh was still a fairly big franchise at that point.
Oh, yeah. He was a big priority. I mean, you had to, if you could hit the Pooh Facebook page, that was one of the best pages to hit in terms of writing articles or getting social copy out. So, yeah, he was a big priority always. So, yeah, I wish they would do more with him,
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, he's a challenging character to write about because, in a weird sort of way, he's everywhere, but at the same time, he's incredibly limited.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of a character where things happen to him. He doesn't he doesn't drive the story in a way where his actions are creating, the chaos or anything else. It's always stuff that he likes honey, he's a nice guy. He gets stuck sometimes, but yeah, there's not a lot of drama there. But I thought the 2011 movie was amazing. And I know that you love, as much as I do, the fact that since it was the last hand-drawn animated movie, it's got a murderer's row of talent behind each character, whether it's Bruce Smith, who just won an Oscar, or Eric Goldberg, Mark Henn. I remember talking to all those guys for that movie, and it was like, how is it that all these people are on one movie? And that movie is a barely released Winnie-the-Pooh feature that came out like a year before in Europe or something. Do you remember that too? That it came out a lot earlier? Yeah.
I don't know. Not a happy story, folks. But the weird thing is, even today, Disney continues to make considerable bank off of Winnie-the-Pooh. I want to say that the Zum Zums that the company created, Winnie-the-Pooh is among the best selling of the Zum Zums, and ironically enough, because the characters can be reduced down to just those handful of features and people still recognize them.
You love those Zoom Zooms, Jim. I know your house is full of them. The cats play with them. No, never?
Mind you, I'm looking at my Dio and what is it, BB-8 Funko Pop. So, yes, they're here next to Knowsmore, which is startling resemblance.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to say.
All right. Well, anyway, so that's the Winnie-the-Pooh story. And now, Drew, you have to be putting on, your track shoes, getting ready to keep tabs on what's going on Mission Impossible wise, right?
I know, yeah. They're about to start shooting.
All right.
Yeah.
Venice is
Venice and Rome starting later this month. So yeah, it's crazy.
Okay.
We're ready to run and gun, Jim. We're there wherever they are. Yeah. And we've got some great guests lined up too. So, keep that in mind. Yeah.
All right. So I'll be fascinated to hear. Forgive me. I know Venice is the flooded city, but wasn't it particularly flooded, like 2 and 3 months ago?
Yeah. It's also weird because they've shot a James Bond movie there. Remember the whole climax of Casino Royale was there.
Oh, that's right.
So they're going to have to do something new. I think a boat chase is probably in order, but that's just me purely hypothesizing. So, yeah.
Okay.
Very exciting.
Can you talk about, who you've got set up you're doing interviews with?
Yeah, we've still got the John Knoll series coming up, who's great. And then after that, we've got this guy, David James, who was the set photographer for 4 of the movies. So really cool. Yeah, we're barreling towards that 100th episode. It's very exciting. So yeah, keep tuned in.
Okay, no, definitely worth checking out, folks. And over here, we have a bunch of podcasts as well. We have Disney Dish with Len Testa. We have Universal Joint with Dustin Fuse. We have the Marvelous Disney podcast that we do with Aaron Adams, looking at Lucasfilm with Dan Z. And then we have I Want That with Michelle Valladolid. So tell you what, folks, if you could do Drew and I a favor, if you could head over to iTunes and rate and recommend not only Fine Tuning, but also Light the Fuse. Likewise, if you really like what we do here, if you get over to Bandcamp and subscribe, well, that makes it that much easier for us to buy Zum-Zums.
Yes.
And now, Light the Fuse, you've got a social media presence, right?
We do, yeah. We're Light the Fuse Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and new episodes every Friday. So please listen, yeah.
Cool. Okay, and on the Jim Hill Media side, you can find us at Twitter, and we're also at Facebook at jimhillmedianews.com, which Nancy told me I have to tell you folks. So anyway, thanks for listening, and Drew and I will be back soon.